All worked.
That's okay?
Yep.
You guys are good? Okay, so like I said, Canada's warming at twice that rate, and Northern Canada's warming at 3 times that rate of the global average. So when we look at sort of what this means globally, and sort of are we on track to meeting our sort of global goals of reducing emissions? So this is just a figure showing our emissions through time. So from the 1990s, sort of our historical emissions, and then where climate models that I work on actually end up projecting how warming is going to change based on current policy. So the very bottom is sort of our goal. So we hope to have emissions peak, and then we hope to have emissions go down to near zero. And that would be consistent with this 1.5 degree global warming target that I think you guys have probably heard of. But sort of where are we currently? And it's well above that. So current emission track has us warming around 2.7 to 3.1 degrees globally. And again, Canada's warming at twice that rate, so that impact can be twice as great here as far as temperature change, and then in the north, it actually can be 3 times as much. But Canada actually is currently sort of recommitting, and all of these global countries are recommitting to the Paris goals and sort of saying, we need to reevaluate. Our current policy isn't on track, so what can we do to get to that 1.5 degree near zero emissions by 2050? And right now, Canada hasn't actually submitted those new goalposts. We haven't said, hey, here's what our emission reduction is going to look like in the next 30 years. And that update needs to happen this year by the end of the year. So there's a couple countries that have already proposed. As we know, the US has sort of pulled out of the Paris Agreement, but we'll see what happens on Tuesday. Things might change if you guys are following the election. But Canada hasn't said anything yet. But we've committed to a couple things previously already. So I think, have you guys maybe seen these ones before? Copenhagen, we agreed to commit to 17% reduction by 2020 to sort of 606 megatons. And you can see right now, currently the most recent emissions report in Canada was 2018, and we're at 729 megatons of CO2. And then the Paris Agreement, we were hoping to get to sort of 511 megatons by 2030. Again, it's not looking very close right now. Mid-century goals, I mean, it's continuously, these commitments, 146 megatons by 2050, and now we've committed to net carbon neutral by 2050. So that's 0 megatons of CO2, and right now we're at 729. So sort of historically, we haven't met our goals. We're sort of off track right now, but there still is some time to get back on track and actually meet our goals that we've committed to internationally. So sort of where are our emissions coming from? And you guys already sort of got this. Most of this is from transportation. This is a huge component of our sort of emission spectrum. But the next sort of the biggest chunk is oil and gas. And I think you guys in BC maybe have heard a little bit about this, but we're going to dive a little bit further in today to talk about oil and gas in Canada, particularly in Alberta and Saskatchewan, where sort of Alberta oil sands are sort of the fastest growing emission source in Canada. So I think that's really where our focus is going to be, and where sort of it's easier to make those subtractions in emissions compared to sort of these deep decarbonization pathways. If you guys have heard about this, it's sort of just infrastructure that's already in place that's very hard to change. So transportation is a very tough one. Buildings is a very tough one. These are things that are already in our built environment that are very hard to reduce emissions in, that would take a lot of investment, but sort of these other industries where we can make a big impact is heavy industry, oil and gas, and electricity. So sort of looking at emissions across Canada, don't get too caught up in the numbers, but just know British Columbia emissions are quite low. And the sectors that are sort of growing in BC are really just that transportation sector. There's a little bit in oil and gas with sort of the LNG stuff that's happening up north, or like the natural gas stuff that's happening up north. But for the most part, BC emissions are quite low. And the same can be said for Manitoba, Quebec, all of the Atlantic provinces. Contributions are very small. Ontario and Quebec, sort of the growing piece of emissions is that transportation sector. You can see it's steadily increasing. But for the most part, most of their energy system is actually decreasing emissions. But then sort of the biggest piece, the really piece that jumps out here is Alberta. And you can see that sort of pink section and the steady increase. And that's oil and gas. And most of that is oil sands in Alberta. So that's where most of our emissions are coming from. And you can see just Alberta and Saskatchewan alone are like 50%, pretty close to 50% of Canada's total emissions. So if we're not talking about sort of oil and gas in Canada, particularly in Alberta and Saskatchewan, then you're not really talking about emissions in Canada. So you can see here's that sort of breakdown of the oil and gas industry across provinces, and for the most part, it's mostly Alberta, and most of it is in the oil sands. So that's this green piece that's sort of spiking straight up. Limited growth in sort of the natural gas, conventional oil, but most of this growth is in oil sands for emissions in Canada. So where are the oil sands? If you guys have talked about this before or talked about this in school, it's mostly near Fort McMurray in Alberta. And you can see here on this map, these are sort of oil sands deposits. And for the most part, oil sands deposits are sort of open pit, open mine, sort of stripping of the top layer to actually get to the oil sands. So it's not your conventional sort of pumped system where you're actually drawing oil out of the ground based on pressure differences. You're actually pulling oil out from the top. So this is sort of the fastest growing sector for emissions in Canada, but also it's pretty carbon intensive. So these oil sands, compared to other oil products that are maybe lighter or cheaper, sort of international products, those emissions are actually lower because it takes a lot more to get oil out of the ground in Alberta than it does anywhere else. And you can often hear this term emission intensity. Oil sands industry sort of love to throw this term around that they're decreasing emission intensity. That just means, when you hear this term, that just means that the sort of emissions per barrel are actually decreasing, but the overall sort of absolute emissions for production likely are increasing. And as we know in Canada, steadily increasing. So what does this mean? Like, how is this actually impacting Canada, what we're contributing here to climate change? And today we're just gonna touch on a few, just four. So sort of wildfires, flooding, heat waves, and Arctic thaw. And you guys already touched on this a little bit with sort of the impacts with wildfires and sea ice melt, but we'll dive in a little bit, and hopefully I can show you guys some pretty cool stuff from my time up north. So this is sort of the big one for me. So I'm from Calgary, but Fort McMurray fire in 2016. This was the largest wildfire evacuation in Canada. Destroyed 6,000 square kilometers, caused 3.8 billion insured damage. But most importantly, this really displaced people. Like, this displaced people. The impact to Fort McMurray was crazy. And this is the heart of the oil sands industry, right? So it's that impact being felt firsthand, like people that work in that industry. I think there was a bit of a realization in Alberta that came around this time, and things did change. So immediately after this, the Alberta provincial government actually sort of put in place more of those sort of goalposts of saying, hey, we're going to commit to reducing our emissions footprint. And there was a lot of backing there from the Albertan public to say, hey, this is sort of experienced firsthand, these impacts in our backyard. We actually do need to sort of step up here. But this has destroyed like homes and people's livelihoods for sure. And it's a big part. And you guys have experienced this here in BC as well, sort of as we see hectares burned in BC and Alberta steadily increasing over time. So this is where most of the wildfires are happening in Canada. Sort of that highest wildfire impact is definitely Alberta and BC, and it seems to be only getting worse. And as we know, like even from this year with fires in California, when you guys, I'm sure, experienced the smoke in early September, it's not good. And we're really seeing it. And most of these ties can be attributed to climate change as sort of intensifying the wildfire season in how long it can be, but also in sort of the extremes in the wildfire season, how dry it can get and how warm it can get to sort of propagate that and only make conditions worse. Another big one here is flooding. So this is from Calgary. If you guys have been, this is the Calgary Stampede, flooded the entire Calgary Stampede fairgrounds. And then in this top left is actually the Saddle Dome where the Calgary Flames play. And you can see like the entire lower bowl is completely flooded. So this flood did some serious damage. Like you can't see the penalty box, you can't see the player box, you can't even see the glass. Like that's how high this flooding was in downtown Calgary, just for some reference. But sadly, 5 lives were lost, but there was as much as $6 billion in financial losses. And this really devastated the city. And again, it's sort of that like impact at home where emissions are coming from that sort of realizes, okay, something has to be done. And I think this played a big role in sort of changing people's view once they can see it in that following election, that actually led to an NDP government instead of a conservative government in Alberta for the first time in like 100 years, which is insane. So it is like seeing this impact firsthand really makes a big difference in people's opinion and can sway sort of how people look at policy and making an impact in their own neighborhoods. And that is sort of that big rising flood cost. So you can see that it's steadily increasing over time. This is insurance claims due to flooding across Canada. And that 2013 flood in Calgary just skyrocketed these insurance claims. Like it destroyed downtown, people's homes, public infrastructure, the library. A lot of this was pretty heavy, but it's only getting worse. And I'm sorry this is so grim, and I'm sure you guys have seen the David Attenborough documentary, which is also very sad. I definitely cried. But this stuff is sort of only, it's sort of a system, right? Like these things are feeding in. And then sort of the third piece here is the heat waves. So here's a couple of major cities in Canada, and here's their sort of mean annual number of 30 plus degree days per year. So you can see it's fairly low in most of these cities: Toronto, Montreal, Regina, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Fredericton. But with like that projection that we saw with current policy from that slide where we were looking at total emissions over time, when you go with that current policy of 2 to 3 degrees of warming, if we stay on track of what we're currently doing, then we can sort of expect these total heat wave days to actually increase quite significantly. So you're going from around 10 per year to up around 50 per year of 30 plus degree days in most of these cities. And this is really tough. This is tough on citizens. This is tough on people that have sort of these pre-existing conditions where they have respiratory problems already, or they're young, or they're old, or now with COVID, this could make things very difficult for people that are sort of breathing in these cities and having to deal with this heat as well. So this is a huge problem. This is a big impact on our senior citizens, especially, and it's not great. And then sort of the last piece here for impacts in Canada is what's happening in the Arctic. So this is a picture of Cambridge Bay, Nunavut. I got to spend about 8 months up there during my master's looking at sea ice and climate change and emissions with the Arctic Ocean. But most of this stuff now, this is all on permafrost. So this is well north of the Arctic Circle. And this is in Victoria Island, so about 70 degrees north. It's right on the Northwest Passage, so well above the tree line. And all of these buildings are sort of situated on permafrost. And as that permafrost starts to melt, this infrastructure starts to slide. So some of the infrastructure in this town is actually sort of being shifted already. And we've like this hamlet has had to address that by actually like very expensively moving some of these houses further up from the shore where these things are breaking up more quickly. Hopefully I can get this video to go, but this is sort of a look at sea ice in the spring. This is again in Cambridge Bay. So you can see this is looking out over sea ice. The dark blue are melt ponds. So this is sort of the onset of sea ice melt. And you can see that things are pretty early in the melt season. So the ice is still quite thick here, but this is getting earlier and earlier every year. So every year the melt is getting earlier and the freeze up is getting later. So that open water season is only getting longer. And this allows the Arctic Ocean to actually take up more heat. So then every year that sea ice is not getting as long to grow and actually get thicker. So every year the sea ice is getting thinner and the sea ice is actually getting less extent. And this is really changing sea ice dynamics in the north and kind of have global implications for climate, as this is sort of the bellwether and a real global feedback of how things are changing. So if things are changing up north quite rapidly, it sort of it's really lets us know how things could change globally. And it's pretty drastic in Cambridge Bay, even right now. And over the short, like 4 or 5 field seasons I put in up there, I really saw some things change. So every year that date moved of when we're actually getting sort of this melt pond surface on top of the ice, and then we're getting melt of the ice. And then Victoria. So here for you guys, it's pretty fortunate that on the islands, being so close to the Pacific Ocean, the climate change effects are mitigated quite well. So they're not as impactful because you have this massive body of water, you know, right beside the island that really, it changes things, how the climate system interacts here, and you don't get those extreme shifts. So in that sort of high emission scenario, or where we currently are, you can actually only see a temperature change on average for Victoria of about 1.5 degrees of warming. So it's not the same as the rest of Canada, where you're looking at 2 degrees of warming already. And then even up north, where you're getting 3 degrees of warming already. So it's not as significant out here. But you, again, higher average precipitation, slight increase, but then some things that maybe Victoria residents and you guys should be slightly concerned about for actually adjusting to climate change impacts is sort of this sea level rise and coastal erosion. So again, infrastructure along the coast could be at risk, people's homes that are sort of very close to shore, storm surges could be higher. These pieces are pretty important. And then this ocean acidification. So this is actually what I work on out here. And the ocean acidification piece can have sort of real negative effects for the fisheries industry or aquaculture, groups that are sort of growing food and mussels here on the shore that need that pH level to be sort of stable or around what that species needs. And when that changes, that species tolerance really gets tested. And some species are more adapted to it, but others can't quite handle that. And that sort of won't be an option anymore going forward. So where does this sort of peak? Where do I think this is going to peak? So this is a projection from BP, one of the world's largest sort of oil producers. And they sort of put out a report pretty recently, just in September, saying that they think global oil demand has peaked right now. So with COVID, they think that global oil demand has already peaked. A sort of important piece to keep in mind here is BP has made a commitment to their investors that they will be net zero by 2050. So they have sort of an invested interest in saying this, but you know, these people are pretty smart and are making these projections. And maybe it won't be this year, but definitely within the next sort of decade, by 2030. And I think that's sort of unanimously what the energy community is thinking, including the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So OPEC, so your Iran, your Iraq, these companies that have sort of a serious investment in oil as it's their primary export and primary source of GDP year after year. And even these countries are saying it's most likely going to peak by 2030. So what does that mean for Canada? How can we sort of adjust? And particularly the oil sands, like we saw being the highest emitting sort of emission source in Canada, how does that look? So this was an article by Mark Little and Laura Kilcrease, who are CEOs of Suncor. Suncor is one of Canada's biggest oil companies, and Alberta Innovates, which is sort of a think tank in Alberta that works on reducing emissions in the oil and gas sector and sort of transitioning things to this sort of low carbon output, mostly that emission intensity stuff instead of absolute emissions. But they seem to think that Canada's oil sands are positioned to move into this space of net zero emissions, or at least delivering products that are lower emissions and can actually put Canada on track to meeting these climate agreement goals. Is that true? I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. But there are a couple avenues for the oil sands to sort of at least reduce emissions a significant amount. So right now, right, 26%, our highest emitting sector in Canada, but I think that can draw down. And one of the big ones is this bitumen beyond combustion. So this just means using oil for something other than burning, which I know sounds insane, but is actually pretty useful. So particularly for carbon fiber. So any of your electric vehicles that you're building, Tesla, even some of these new ones from GM, they're all sort of using carbon fiber as sort of this base to build these vehicles, as it's extremely light, very durable, a little bit more expensive than steel, but delivers sort of this long-term durability for these electric vehicles because it's lesser load and easier strain on these batteries. And if you're looking at sort of not charging for extended periods of time and getting sort of electric vehicle infrastructure across Canada, like on Highway 1, then it's going to take cars like this to really do that. So to get that technology to where it needs to be, Canada could play a role in delivering that, because the oil sands are very high carbon density. So that means it's easier to actually get oil sands bitumen to sort of this carbon fiber stage than it would be from something that's a lighter oil, like Saudi crude or Texas crude. Another couple options for the oil sands as well to reduce emissions are hydrogen. So I think you guys have maybe heard this thrown out. It's sort of always been this sort of big piece in the sky of, can we get hydrogen fully integrated and can it work? And it always seems just a couple years away. And I think the technology is nearly there, but the integration component is the piece that isn't there. So we all know electric vehicles with Tesla, but these hydrogen-based vehicles aren't quite there yet commercially and for marketing. But there is demand. So particularly in like these heavy sectors, mostly shipping, like your freight, also any of your industries that need to create things that need high temperatures. So building, like actually getting to a steel product, or burning something to get to asphalt as well. Like these things are very high emissions intense, but they can't usually get there without sort of a source that can actually deliver that sort of heat. So hydrogen offers an alternative there as well. Geothermal energy, all the well infrastructure, so not so much the oil sands, but more the conventional oil, all the well infrastructure in Alberta and Saskatchewan can definitely contribute, because most of their power grid, unlike you guys here in BC, your electricity grid is all BC Hydro. It's like 97% hydroelectric. In Alberta and Saskatchewan, it's not even close. It's like 90% coal and natural gas, about a 40-50 split. And geothermal could offer an alternative to bring down emissions there as well. And then lithium, smaller piece, but also could be a product, especially as like solar panels start to roll out, an important component. And there's sort of already that mining infrastructure in place in Alberta and Saskatchewan that could sort of tap into this lithium reserve as mostly an economic sort of makeup for lack of exporting oil. But none of this is going to be easy. All four of those sort of solutions, if you will, or at least what people are claiming to be solutions for reducing emissions, it's going to take something else, right? And that transition is inevitable, especially as sort of globally a lot of money is being moved around to divest from fossil fuels. A lot of portfolios with banks are looking to look at their emissions output of like what they're actually investing in and reduce that output. So the transition is sort of inevitable. So this is good. Like all those impacts we talked about before, people realize this is obviously real and are taking very important large scale steps to move that in the right direction. But I think an important piece here is the justice component of this is not inevitable. That's going to take our voices. And I think this is something Hannah's going to touch on a little bit after this, is we need to be advocating for that. So climate change impacts, I didn't get to touch on it today because we were so short. It's not the same for everyone. And most likely the groups that are getting impacted most heavily and possibly the worst are the groups that contributed the least to climate change. So this needs to be sort of a just transition, not just a transition. And that's up to us. That's sort of on us to use our voices, use our platforms, tell policymakers what we want and how we want this to look. So as far as what I've done,
just wanted to let you know you have like 5 or 10 more minutes for your presentation.
Awesome. This is the last slide, and then we can take some questions. So for my own platform, as like a climate scientist, I know it's tough to communicate with people through academic journals. You publish that stuff. It's very dense, very hard to read. 10 people in your field that are already experts in it are usually the only people that read that stuff. which is great because it's contributing to your field and moving things along and improving those climate models that we saw. Sort of, if we emit this much, what is the impact? That's our ultimate goal to contribute to. But you need to use that creative space as well. So I got to partner with a group of students, high school students, a couple of junior high students actually, and some students in a First Nation school close to my home in Siksika Nation. And we actually built this art display that we got to put on, go on sort of like a tour of Calgary Public Libraries, as well as sort of events where oil and gas industry was present. And essentially this display was sort of my piece of that, getting information out. So the whole display was built around sort of an old Albertan oil derrick, but all of the sort of messaging around it was energy innovation, new alternatives, just transition, with Indigenous recognition. So how can we bring Indigenous groups in and actually sort of really empower them to drive this change as well, and sort of speak up for themselves and empower themselves in their own communities, which has been extremely important. And sort of that energy independence component is huge in this as well. But I want to say, like, absolutely don't, like, I can't draw at all, but bringing these groups together was sort of my contribution in this project. And that's the important piece. Use the voice that you know and use the voice that you have to sort of really get anything out there that you're passionate about. For me, it was the energy transition in Alberta. And I know we talked mostly about this today because that's sort of the biggest component in Canada. But there are definitely sort of impacts here in Victoria that you guys can make a difference on, particularly transportation. Like we saw in BC, transportation is that sector that really needs a lot of work because those emissions are growing. And same with Quebec and Ontario. So that's maybe a piece that you could contribute to and sort of say, hey, we need to step up here. Policymakers, here's how this should look. So with that, here's sort of the last slide. If you want to take this down, this is your current MP for Victoria. And if you want to sort of make that Alberta stretch, she's your best person to talk to because she is federal. So we'll have some riding here, especially with the NDP Liberal sort of coalition. So push Laurel Collins to say, hey, here's what we think. Here's what we think of the Alberta oil industry. Here's what we think of maybe some of the alternatives, and maybe incentivizing some of those while penalizing some of the other things that are contributing to emissions. These are all options, and I think you guys definitely, just because you're not of voting age, can absolutely send her an email, give her a call, and say, hey, here's what we want, here's what we think. So if there's any questions, I know we went through things pretty quick, but like, let me know. Caitlin, I'm not sure.
So I don't see any questions yet, but I just want to let people know they can put questions either in the chat or use the Q&A function.
If you guys have any questions after this, I think, like, Crystal, you can definitely send out my email. Anybody can follow up. Yeah.
Totally, Patrick. I will share your contact.
Oh, we do have some questions in the Q&A. Someone asked, what is the most interesting thing you've learned through your research?
The most interesting thing. The most interesting thing I've learned definitely is how to survive in minus 55 in polar night. I put in some time in Cambridge Bay in January, February, where the sun would sort of like, you wouldn't even rise. It would just sort of be like dusk, dawn, like transition on the horizon for about 20 minutes. Pretty weird, pretty cold, but definitely I learned a ton about, okay, here's how you actually can make it in minus 55 on a snowmobile in the Arctic in the pitch black, which was pretty cool.
Okay, looks like that's it for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Feel free to follow up, but hope you have a great rest of the symposium here with Let's Talk Science.
There's actually another question in the chat, guys, before you switch over.
Yeah, sorry, I see it. So the question is about the trade-off between jobs in Alberta and Saskatchewan and transitioning away from fossil fuels. Could you please let us know more about the number of jobs that could potentially be lost in this process of moving away from fossil fuels?
This is a great question. And since I'm not a politician, I think I can actually answer this honestly. It's not one-to-one. If there's 50,000 jobs in Alberta, Saskatchewan oil and gas right now, there will not be 50,000 jobs after this. Even with all four of those sort of like carbon fiber, hydrogen, geothermal, and lithium, there's no way this is going to be one-to-one. And people are going to lose their jobs in that sector, not only because of the transition piece, but also automation. And I think this is a big piece that people are forgetting is most of these mines already, like, you know, gold mines and diamond mines are operating autonomously in Canada. So those machines are actually run by sort of machine learning algorithms for mining. And now the oil and gas sector is adapting that as well. So machine learning is most likely more of a threat to those jobs and investment than anything to do with the transition. So keep that in mind when you hear these things. It's tough, but people are going to have to find other work. It's just the reality of how this is going to go.
Okay, so I think that's it for the questions. Are we?
Yep, looks like it.
Okay, excellent. Okay, guys, thank you very much, Patrick. That was a very insightful presentation. I totally learned a lot, having moved here just 2 years ago. I learned a lot. And next up, we're going to have Claire and Melissa, who's going to present a quick trivia for you educators and students. Yuri, I believe she already shared the Google Forms link in the chat function. She just shared it again. So educators, if you can just click on the link and access those forms, and then I'll turn it over to Claire, who is going to lead us through a quick trivia. Oh, no link? No. Oh, it's not working?
Oh,
Oh, okay, there we go.
Claire, you're only sending it to all panelists. So when you select down on the little arrow, you can select all panelists and attendees.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not
there we
Claire.
go.
Yuri, sorry.
Okay. Whew.
Sorry about that. That's
All right,
yeah,
there
it should
we
be
go.
There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
so we got the screen going here.
Go for it, Claire.
Hopefully. No. Let's try this. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do some trivia. And what we will do is you'll have those, the Google Forms that we just sent through there. And educators, if you could just go ahead and fill those out as we work through. And we will just tally up the points at the end and find out who our winners are. So yes, there we go. We're going to have 2 rounds. This first round is going to have about 6 questions. That's going to be right now. And then our second round is going to have 7 questions. And like I said, our points are going to be tallied up at the end of each round. Okay, so our first question is, scientists measure daily CO2 levels at the Mauna Loa Conservatory in Hawaii. Around what is the current day CO2 concentration in the atmosphere? Oops. So I'll give you a couple minutes for that. A couple seconds. And I'll just hop over maybe to our next question. And our second question, let me know if I need to go back or anything. Our second question is, what is the term that defines the fraction of light that is reflected by a surface? And our third question is, when Arctic ice melts, what will happen to the ocean? And we'll keep going. And then our fourth question, on what continent have these types of samples been used to study past climates? That's this guy. Okay, let me see if I can get my pointer. There we go. That's this guy right here, this ice core. What continent? Ooh. And what two aspects, this one's a two-pointer, what two aspects of ancient climates can be determined from analyzing the composition of gas bubbles that are trapped in ice cores? That's also about this guy here. So I'll get you to submit your Google Forms. If you guys want to let me know, oopsie, how many, if there's any questions or if I need to go back to any questions, that'd be great.
Or maybe if you can just go over the questions one more time,
Sure.
just to be
Yeah,
sure.
sounds good. Perfect. Okay, so back to question one. We'll leave that up for a little bit. We got some time. That is around what is the current day CO2 concentration in the atmosphere at Mauna Loa in Hawaii? And we'll go back to these guys. And question two, the term that defines the fraction of light that is reflected by a surface. As well as question three, what will happen to the ocean when the Arctic ice melts? And question 4 and 5 again, on what continent have these types of samples been used to study past climates? And what two aspects of ancient climates can be determined from analyzing the composition of gas bubbles that are trapped in ice cores? So we'll get you guys to submit your Google Forms here, and Melissa will tally up the points, and we will come back, find out who the winners are later, and we'll do some more trivia later on today.
Okay, thank you so much, Claire. All right, educators and students, as well as volunteers and panelists, thank you so very much for your attention thus far. So we are going to go into a short break, which I believe one class has to leave. However, for the classes and participants that are coming back, after the break, we're going to head into Hannah Gelderman's presentation, and that is the zine that we're going to make together. So if you can, just get those materials together in preparation for Hannah's presentation. So we're going to go on break now, and we will begin in about 15 minutes. So we come back at 10:10, and we will have Hannah's presentation. Thank you so much. I will remain in the room here if anyone has any questions, concerns, comments, or anything. But for right now, we're going to go on break until 10:10.
will be guiding us through an interesting activity that combines both art and climate change. And so the symposium stands to be informative, insightful, and a creative space for students to expand their knowledge and interest on this topic. So shout out to Hannah. Take it away. Yay.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks, Yuri. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just want to quick confirm that the attendees of the classes are back. We can get an answer in the chat. And I also wanted to, before we start, check if you have the zine pages printed in the classes. It was these 8.5 by 11. If not, it's okay. It just helps me know kind of what instructions to give. Oh shoot. Okay, that's okay. Do students have like an 8.5 by 11 paper? Just a blank paper? Or even we have paper and supplies. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you can, I'll give a bit more detail at that point, but as long as there's some paper and supplies, or like at the very least some writing or drawing materials, that will be great. Cool. So I'm gonna share my screen and go through this slideshow, and then Caitlin is helping out. And so Caitlin, yeah, we'll keep an eye on the chat or Q&A. So if there's things that come up, and there's a few links that Caitlin will share in the chat as well as we go. Yeah, so, oops, I didn't even share my screen. I just like started the slideshow. Let's try again, there we go. All right. Is that showing up for everyone? Okay, getting some thumbs up, right on. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit today, like trying to pick up from where Patrick left off, and my focus is on art and climate justice. And so I also want to say I'm calling in from Treaty 6 territory in Miskochiwaskahiagan, which is also known as Edmonton, Alberta. And so this is Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, and Métis Nation territory. And so I was living in Victoria for 2 years doing a Master of Education, but I'm from Edmonton and have moved back here. And so I'm grateful to be on these lands. And this is the river that runs through the city. So it's yeah, it's a beautiful place and beautiful lands, and has a long, long history of many different First Nations and Indigenous peoples living and traveling through this region. And I know, thanks for the introduction, Yuri. I'll give a little more background. So yeah, my name is Hannah and my pronouns are she and her. I have a background as a visual artist. So my undergrad was in visual arts. I do lots of, painting, collage, kind of a variety of mediums. And I've worked as an art instructor. So like, for example, when I was living in Victoria, I was teaching some art classes at Cedar Hill, at the Cedar Hill Rec Center. And so different things like that. And I also do lots of organizing with different volunteer-run climate justice groups. And I come to these lands as a settler. My grandparents and great-grandparents all immigrated from the Netherlands. So yeah, so yeah, kind of again to pick up where Patrick left off, I really come to this work personally, like as an artist, and thinking about how can I, as an artist in the arts community broader, kind of use our skills to work for climate justice and climate solutions, and how can people who are working for change in whatever, in their schools, in their communities, also use their, or make their work in organizing and push for change more creative and more engaging. And there's lots to it, because like everything that Patrick's saying is such an important foundation around climate science, but he also mentioned it can be hard to communicate that climate science. And so art is one avenue that can help communicate around climate science. It can help connect in different, like on an emotional level, in different ways than just hearing facts, or it can like build on what the facts are already telling us and communicate it in more personal ways or emotional ways. And also art is useful too, because right, like we know the climate science, we know what solutions are possible. It's not a matter of like, oh, what do we do about this? It's very clear like what needs to be done. It's a political challenge and a social challenge to like, yeah, make that change actually happen in social and political realms. So art has a huge role to play in that, and as well as like art as a piece of social movement. So people power and social movements having a huge role to play in that, in making change happen. So that's kind of where I come in and where I'm situating what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to go through briefly. I have a hard copy here. So for my Master of Education project, while I was at UVic, I was looking specifically doing research around the role of art in seeking climate justice. And so I made a series of zines, which are here. And then Caitlin can share the link in the chat and we can send it out if you didn't receive it, and probably a follow-up email. So if anyone was interested in having these zines printed or looking at digital copy in your classroom or on your computer, you can definitely do that. They're meant for distribution and to be useful for people. So I'm going to quickly talk about the zines, like some of the main points from the zines, and then we'll get into a bit of an activity. So this is a series of 6 zines. I'll talk about them each a bit more in depth, but each zine has a slightly different topic, a different aspect around art and climate justice. So, and I did want to say a note on a climate justice framework, and it's great that Patrick also mentioned this, because it's exactly what Patrick was saying, is that I really try to take a climate justice framework in the way that I'm talking about it, and also through art and through organizing and activism, because it offers a way to, yeah, like Patrick said, really recognize that some of the people who are most impacted by climate change are the people who have contributed least. And kind of, it can recognize that like things like capitalism and colonialism are root causes of our climate crisis, and that so we're really trying to change systems and address systems. And as we do this, make sure that like in particular in Canada, the Indigenous peoples who have been at the forefront of experiencing climate impacts are at the front of climate solutions and being uplifted. And so communities or people that have been marginalized can be the most uplifted and not left behind as we transition away from fossil fuels. And it also provides a framework for kind of some of the other questions that came up around workers. So climate justice can offer a framework for a just transition. So as we transition that's based in justice, it's really looking after people. It's talking about jobs for workers. It's not just like talking about how big corporations can transition and then like fire all their workers. It's like, how can workers be taken care of? How can they have job retraining and reskilling? What kind of like expansion of green sector jobs can we have to make sure that everyone has meaningful employment? Because that's absolutely necessary. So there's a lot more. I won't keep going about climate justice, but it's definitely a valuable framework, I would say. I kind of touched on that already. So the first zine is mostly an introduction to talk about, I focused on participatory visual arts. Like I mentioned, I'm a visual artist, but I would say for any art, like if you're coming from drama, theater, poetry, creative writing, any sort of like creative or arts-based modality, what I'm talking about would apply to that. And some of the things that art can do, like I mentioned, is engaging emotion, engage imagination, support social movements. Like there's so many things that art can do. It's not necessarily a singular thing, and every art project might not be doing all of these things, but there's potential for that. Facilitate dialogue, like the example that Patrick shared, people who are visiting the libraries that could start a conversation, invite people to think about something in a new way. So, and the importance of doing this at a local level, yeah, doing projects that are situated in one's own community can speak to like local climate impacts and solutions. And also my interest on a participatory and collaborative projects. So not like it's valuable to sit and make art on your own, but I'm especially interested in like the power and the energy that can come when people like come together and make projects together. So in the second zine, I focus on storytelling and imagination and the power that art has to tell stories, whether it's stories about injustice or pain or trauma, to share that so people can know and it can raise awareness, but also stories about hope in the world that we want to create. There's kind of, or there can be such a void of like what we're working towards. Like we know the problems, we know that we're in a climate crisis, but it's like, what are we working towards? What can the world look like? What kind of world do you want to live in? And so being able to create those visions through art, because in order to get to build the world we want, we first have to imagine it, and art can help us also share that vision and share what we imagine with others, to invite them to mobilize around that and to also get on board. And sorry, I am flipping through some of these fast, in case, like I kind of mentioned some of those things already. And also that, like I said, you can look at these zines on your own and spend a bit more time with them. I'm just going to be conscious of the time that we have here today. So the third zine is around activism and the role that art can play specifically in activism and social movements. Yeah, definitely around like at marches or rallies, having signs and banners and like sharing messages on signs and banners, and also creatively, like, yeah, sharing messages to engage people who are bystanders in what is being talked about and what is being shared. And also like for visual unity. So if you're like familiar with the Sunrise Movement in the States, they have a lot of like organizers and volunteers across the country, but they have a lot of similar visuals and coordinated visuals. So it's like showing that they're a part of this movement all together, even though they're spanning the country. And so, yeah, that the way that can help with belonging and unity and visual unity in movements. And that creative actions or creative events will travel really far on social media. If you have something that's artistic and visual, can capture attention, and like maybe only some people protesting with signs. If there's some more elements, it can capture attention in a bigger way. And also that we're, as social movements, as individuals working as a collective, kind of as at the grassroots level, we're up against corporations with so much money and politicians who are buddy with oil industry, and so they have a lot of money. So it's on us to like use our people power and creativity to kind of to fight back against that and to push for change. The fourth theme is about collaboration and the power of working together, and that just by working together, it also offers time and space for conversation. It can be a way to invite people in to participate in a project, in something that's happening. Like some people might say, oh, I'm not the type of person who like goes to a rally, but they might be the type of person who, you know, wants to come and help paint something. So it's kind of another way of inviting people to participate. And I kind of touched on this at the beginning, is that art can really enhance climate communications, and that, yeah, there's lots of possibility for people who are coming from a climate science background or science background to collaborate with artists to work on how to communicate. And there is examples of this. I don't have any just here, but Patrick was a good example in other places where it can be a really effective collaboration. And the idea of working together as something that's prefigurative. And so the word prefigurative is like the way that we can already live and embody the world that we want to see. And so if we want to see a world that is caring and creative, and we're already doing that in our day-to-day actions, we're prefiguring the world that we want, and there's power and value in that. The fifth theme is around responding to crisis, and that arts can help people in crisis situations. And I kind of think about this too as like, there's our slow crisis, like living in a high stress society, a capitalist society, can be stressful, but it's not necessarily, yeah, it's like slow and ongoing. And then there's the immediate crisis, like if your community experiences a fire or a flood or all these like, yeah, big kind of extreme weather events or other things or emergency situations, that in both of those situations, art can be something that helps people in lots of different ways, like some of the ways that I've talked about, but also like kind of either processing things or re-envisioning communities after crisis, or talking about how things can be different. Yeah, so again, some of those things that I already talked about, but like art can offer space for complexity, for processing experiences. It can help build community, and those are all things that cultivate resilience and cultivate, or yeah, strengthen our ability to respond to crisis. And this one is kind of about how, again, how art is like one tactic, one piece of change. And so there's like lots of other things is like different, yeah, science-based solutions, policy solutions. There needs to be change in so many avenues, and art is one of those and can work across different avenues, but it's certainly by no means the only thing that's going to help us. So, and the sixth zine is about kind of offering a bit more logistics. So if you're like, oh, I'm totally into this and I want to do like a collaborative art project, this zine talks a little bit about, gives some considerations about who can you work with, what might your project look like, where could you exhibit it, how could you share it, and then a few questions and prompts, which also some of the stuff we're going to do in a little bit around the other little zines that you'll be making help to think about this. But like, yeah, what's your project and concept and theme? What are the steps? How are you going to invite people to participate? All those kinds of things. So again, folks thinking about the logistical side. So that's that. I know I kind of rushed through it. Are there any questions at this point about the zines at all? All right. Okay, and I don't know, did that other class did I get a response from the other instructor, the educator, about if the class got the zines printed? Because we heard from one.
I believe that's Miss Fairweather's class, Hannah, and
yeah,
they had to leave.
Oh, okay.
Because they have band.
Okay, right on.
I believe so.
That's okay.
But I do know that Miss who is it? Miss Nicolash's class is quite excited to start.
Okay, cool. Then I'm gonna, do you have like actual 8.5 by 11 or whatever size blank paper to fold into a zine in that class? Or do you just want to do the like write in notebooks or on paper? I just want to confirm if I should like go through the steps of folding a paper into a zine or if we should just dive into the prompts.
Yeah, they have blank paper.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And can you also see the video and the instructions from? Okay, cool. So perfect. We have the instructions on the slide, and I'll, as best I can, also like show the steps on my camera, and hopefully it works. And if not, you know, you can always just like write in a piece of paper or journal or however your page turns out. But what I had, and you can, yeah, I had a zine that had prompts in it, but you can follow, like redraw my images if you want to, or just on each, once we have the little zine, little booklet, you can just do like answer each prompt on a page, and that's totally fine. So, all right, are folks ready? The first thing you do is you're gonna fold your paper in half. What is it? Hamburger style? I always remember that some kids that I've met would say that, like hamburger and hot dog style. So the first few folds that we're just gonna do are like getting the creases on the page, kind of like lots of first steps in origami are like you're getting your creases. So you're gonna fold it again, hamburger style. So you have 2 folds, and then again once more. So you kind of have a little booklet this size. And then you want to unfold it to back to halfway, so it just has the one big fold. And then you're gonna make sure you notice which is your open side and which is your fold side. And take your scissors and cut on your folded side down your middle crease line just to the center. Like that. So then you have a little slice in the middle of your page. Do we need another second, or like folks up to speed? Okay, we can keep going. So then once you have your page with your folds and your cut in the middle, you want to fold it hot dog style the other way. And you can, yeah, whatever, smooth those creases so they're a bit, I guess, tighter, better fold. And then once you have that, you want to hold it like this, hold your two ends and push them together. And then, so it's kind of, I guess like overlapped into a rectangle. Then again, you can like kind of smooth down your fold edges. And then you have this, and then it doesn't really matter which way you fold it. You can fold it, you just want to fold it in half once more, and then you'll have, go over all your folds, and then you have your little mini booklet. So like 5-6 page little zine. And I didn't really say this, if you're not familiar with the word zine, it's like the word magazine, but really like a small one, a small magazine. So we just call them a zine. So did everyone get that? Sometimes it takes a minute if it's your first time or it's like a classroom full of people. Are we getting any yes or no's in the chat there? I guess.
Nothing in the chat so far.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So I'll just show you quickly too the one that I had with the template. And on my upcoming slides, I have the prompts written too. So we'll go through the zine and you can just write or draw, or a combination of writing and drawing on your own little zine now to answer these questions or to respond to the prompts that I have. So, oh, where are we at? Okay, there we go. So the first one is the cover, and you can draw this if you want, a sun and a cloud or something. We're gonna go in and give it a title at the end, but if you wanna write on the front, the date, your name, any other information or quick little doodle. And again, probably move through this like at a fairly good pace, which sometimes it would be nicer to take a bit more time to think about these, but let's just think of it as like, these are little ideas to get you started to thinking about it. And then if you're like really interested, take some time later or as a class to like think about this stuff a little bit more. Yeah, have a pen, you can write or draw title, or not the title, but your name and the date. I'll draw. So I drew a tree on mine this time. And then you can open it up to the first page. And sorry, I know that the pages aren't, it's like a lot of white background. But what I would like is if on this first page, so the left-hand side only, to respond to the prompt to an outdoor place I love is. And so you can write or draw an outdoor place somewhere outside, somewhere outdoors that you love. And it can be somewhere close to you that you maybe pass by every day or go every day, or it can be somewhere that you've been once that you loved and it was amazing, or it can be somewhere that you've gone like every summer for a holiday. And you can write, it's up to you. You can add a bit more information, like why do you really love this place, or what's special about it, or like what good memory do you have there. Now I'll say, well, an outdoor place that I really love, I think the photo I shared at the beginning for the territory acknowledgement so the River Valley here in Edmonton is a place that, one of the places that I go a lot, like for running and biking. And so it's probably one of the most consistent outdoor spaces that I go to and have gone to. And it's really beautiful. You can see the seasons changing. It's really good for my mental health when I like spend some time outside, go for a run. So that's my answer. And so in the class, if anyone wants to share their answer, you don't have to, but if you would like to, and then we can get some of those answers in the chat. And I guess if you're all in class together, you'll hear each other's answers, but I'm also really curious. So does anyone want to share an outdoor place that they love? And then Caitlin will read them out from the chat.
Well, Patrick answered Sombrio Surf Beach.
I spent some time there too. Oh, very beautiful spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're waiting for a few answers in the chat, if anyone else, like any of the panelists or volunteers, if any of you want to share.
I would say for me, one that I really love is Arbutus Cove, just here in Victoria. It's a nice place to go, just to go watch the sunrise or something.
Nice. I don't think I ever went there.
Yeah, it's a really small beach.
Okay.
Oh, Yuri says Cadborough Bay. That's a nice one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's special living by the ocean for sure. There's lots of beautiful spots.
Melissa says the beach along Dallas Road.
Nice. Oh, this also makes me miss the West Coast, so.
Yeah, there's some pretty gorgeous nature.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I wanted to ask this question is kind of coming from a place of gratitude for the places that we do have and love. And so kind of when we're thinking about, I mean, like, yeah, the information that Patrick provided it's sad and it's scary and it can be frightening. And so kind of starting to think about how we can take action and how we can work through things in our own lives is coming from a place of gratitude and appreciation for what we do have, and thinking about places that we love that are outdoors as places to protect and places, to make sure that they can hopefully stay as natural places that you and others can enjoy. Is there anything coming up in the chat?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's see, I might move on, or folks, maybe we can get a quick check-in if like from the class, if you're like still thinking about it, or if no one's really feels like sharing, which is also okay.
Oh, they said they will have to leave in about 10 minutes, but
Okay.
They can continue on their own later. So what I can do, I can put the rest of the prompts into the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for that update. That's good to know. And I'll flip through them. And I think Crystal can definitely send the template. So you would still be able to like print it out and do it as a class or as individuals if you would want to. Maybe I'll just go through the rest of them on the slides as well, also as Caitlin has shared them. So yeah, the next question is, I have it here, it would be on your right-hand side of the first page. To be alive at this stage of the climate crisis feels ... And then you can kind of say however, what it feels like. And I think this is an invitation to reflect on it in a way that can honor your emotions. And again, because it's hard in my experience of like organizing and talking about this, it can be hard to share how we feel about it. It can be heavy, it can be terrifying. It can also be, there's a lot of possibility in this moment to make change, and that can be exciting. So and those are some of the things that I feel. So yeah, if you want to take the time when you respond to this one to share a little bit about what does it, how do you feel as a young person to be alive at this moment in time? And you can also, I haven't really spoken about COVID, but we're also in another like kind of unique moment, or I guess a first for a lot of us to experience this kind of pandemic. So it doesn't necessarily even need to be like only climate focused. It's like the broader time that we're living in. And so so you can probably respond to these later. I'll just speak to each of them now. This prompt, a world I hope to see, is meant to span 2 pages in the middle here, and is an opportunity for thinking about yeah, the future that you want to see. If you could imagine in 5 years or 10 years or 15, you can choose the time frame that works, or maybe have like 5, 10, 15 years. What do you hope to see in the world? What do you want your life, what do you wish your life or hope your life could be like? And I would say this is an opportunity to be bold and hopeful in your thinking. It's also, I find, it can be hard to do that because it's like so grounded in reality, like what I think right now is politically possible or realistic. And it's like, oh, I wish that we could transition to 100% renewable. Will that happen? But to be visionary and to be hopeful is important in order, like I said before, to be able to share that vision. Yeah, and to have something to work towards, whether or not like we achieve that, I guess, like 100% renewable by 2050 or something, but it can still be something that motivates us in our work. And then the last, I just have these together, the last few, something I'm already doing to make this world possible and something I can join, support, or do more of, I have my pencil covering that, to bring this world into reality is. And so thinking about, yeah, what is something that you're doing? Maybe you've been involved in or attended or helped organize some of the youth climate strikes, or with your class attending those. I know that there's lots of turnout in Victoria for that. If you're doing things in your school level, community level, wherever, something that you're already doing, small or big, you can note that down. And then if you're thinking about something that you can do more of, maybe you didn't attend the climate strikes, but you're like, oh, I'd like to next time, or help organize that, or talk to your principal about getting solar panels on your school, or like getting some friends to also talk, like as a group approaching school administrators or as a class, thinking about what you can do to push for change in where you have influence in your sphere or in your community. So, and I think these two are really important as well, because hearing about climate solutions that are already in action, or hearing about what people are already doing that's working for positive change, can be a big motivator for other people to get involved. And so it's like, again, when Patrick is talking about a lot of the climate impacts, that can be pretty like demobilizing, or like be upsetting, or be like, okay, it's not worth it. It's what, like a lost cause, or like, those are pretty common responses to that kind of information. Whereas sharing solutions that people are already enacting can be something that can motivate people, can invite people to take action alongside you. And so the value in sharing solutions that are already in action, from like a change perspective, is really valuable and necessary. And then the last page is just that whatever you responded to any of these can be a starting point for your own climate action, inviting others into climate action, for creative projects or creative activism, for sharing your story. If you wanted to like write a short story or draw a picture or write a poem about any of these things, make a rap, whatever. These are kind of can start, hopefully help you start thinking about that if you want to. Or to have a conversation with your family at supper tonight, or just think about things more on your own. So that was, yeah, hopefully just like get the wheels turned in on some of the things that I've been thinking about, and that can feed into to creative projects. So yeah, and then for the title, I was thinking at the end, you can just go back through what you read and choose a word or a phrase that you really like that stands out from what you wrote, and make that your title. Yeah, so that's kind of the zine and a quick version of the zine. Are there any questions or comments or ideas that folks are coming up with after that? Yeah, or any slides you want me to go back to? I'm just gonna stop the screen sharing here too. All right, yeah. So, well, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, and I think, like Patrick said too, I'm happy to have my info, like my email address, shared if there are any questions or any follow-up from any of this that I've talked about. So Crystal can probably pass that on too.
Oh yeah, most definitely, Hannah, thanks. I will be sending a follow-up email to all the educators and with the attachments of the templates and things like that. So thank you. And now, Hannah, I believe you're finished, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're just gonna go through the last couple of questions for the trivia for recording purposes. Claire's gonna lead us through it. And so Claire, take it away.
Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can make this work again. Oh. All right, can you see that? Maybe? Oh.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect, great, all right. So there are the answers from the last questions. You guys all did great. Okay, perfect. So the first one, 411 parts per million. The oceans will warm, albedo, Antarctica, and greenhouse gases and temperature. So you guys can, of course, go through these as a class again and talk about them and discuss. So we're going to use the same Google form as last time. Or, of course, you can just discuss this with your class and keep going. The answers will be at the end of the slideshow. So question 1 is a long, deep body of water with a steep mountains on 3 sides that opens up to the ocean is called what? And we'll keep going through. If you need to, you can, of course, pause the recording. There we go. Okay. And question 2, there's a little bonus in this one. Amphibians are experiencing extinctions at a rate estimated to be 45,000 times higher than the background extinction rate. There are 3 main reasons why so many species are extinct or critically endangered, and what are 2 of them? So if you can come up with all 3, there's a bonus point, and of course you can discuss this with your class as well. And question 3, a little butterfly. Monarch butterflies are very sensitive to increasing CO2. This is because the main food source for monarch caterpillars will become too toxic to tolerate. What plant did the monarchs depend on? These little monarch butterflies. And I'll go on, just move along right to the next one. And question 4, a keystone species is a predator that helps control the population of prey species, which affects the quantity of plants and animals further down the food web. In an Arctic ecosystem, what is an example of a keystone species? And I'll just jump right along to the next one as well. And there's also another bonus point for this one. Question 5, there are many conservation success stories that are allowed an at-risk species to recover, like the Puerto Rican Amazon parrot, where reintroduction of the species to a state park allowed the species numbers to increase. What is an example of a conservation approach that can be used to help recover species numbers? Bonus point if you can come up with 2 examples of a conservation approach. All right, so I'll hop on to the next one here. And question 6 is, increasing CO2 in the atmosphere is resulting in ocean acidification. What will happen to small calcium carbonate shelled organisms when the pH of the ocean decreases? There are these little so-called calcium carbonate shelled organisms that we referenced here. And question 7 is this, here we go. This picture illustrates an effect of ocean acidification on corals. And what is this process called? So take a look at this picture, and that will, the process of ocean acidification causes this. So end of round 2, of course, you can submit the Google form if you like, but you can also just discuss this with your class. Feel free to go back to any other questions and come up with your answers. Try to get some bonus points, and we'll keep going. So the answers for this one, question 1 was fjord, and then the 3 were for question 2 were habitat destruction, invasive species, and chytrid fungi. And question 3 was milkweed. And question 4 is polar bear. And question 5, 1 point plus the bonus. These are examples of each something you could come up with: invasive species control, zoos, site protection, legislation, or something like species reintroduction. And then our last one, this one is bleaching. There we go. Okay, and that's all I have for you guys today. And thank you for joining for our trivia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. That was super interesting, and I sure learned a lot. I thought I knew stuff, but I didn't. So I got a couple of questions incorrect. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen one more time as we close. Thank you very much, Hannah, for that awesome presentation. Fun fact, Hannah and I are in the same program, so yay, it's my homie. All right, so before we go, initially the intention was to have the educators fill out this survey, but in their absence, I'm just going to say that this is going to be included in the follow-up email that I'm going to send to the educators. And I would like to say thank you to our National Symposium supporter, Bayer. Thank you to Hannah and Patrick, our presenters, for that insightful presentation and really thought-provoking questions. And Patrick, coming from the Caribbean and an island where, you know, oil and natural gas is a heavy commodity and where there's lots and lots of drilling, your presentation definitely gave me a lot to think about moving forward as well. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to the wonderful volunteers for taking the time out of your busy schedule and probably preparations for midterms and finals and research papers to really help spread the news or the word about climate change and support Let's Talk Science. Again, thank you to Bayer, to all our visionary donors, our catalyst donors, which includes RBC, our innovator donors, our champion donors, our discover donors, our explorer donors, and that is it. Thank you all very, very much. Educators, please look out for an email from me by the Let's Talk Science email, just as a follow-up, including all the resources, links to Hannah's website, as well as Patrick's information, contact information, if you would like to continue further with him. Thank you very much, volunteers. I will surely be in touch with you guys for next month's symposium. And I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.